Welcome to the Adventures Club of Los Angeles. My name is Andrew McGregor. I am Vice President at this illustrious organization that for the past 100 and plus years has met every week, rain, shine, or conflict, to discuss, disseminate, and share adventures while glorifying life off the beaten path. And in that grand tradition, I am humbled and honored to welcome Gower Frost to our stage. Thank you for joining us tonight, sir.
Well, Andrew, thank you very much for inviting me. I'm very honored to be here tonight, and it's a wonderful place, I have to say. I'm really impressed. Extraordinary.
Well, thank you so much.
Thank you for inviting me.
Of course.
I look forward to talking to you about my adventure.
So we have Africa, Hollywood's golden era, your life. Where shall we begin? Lost tribes, vanishing tribes. And
what I really like to do is, I thought about it a lot when you invited me, and I thought, well, why was I originally interested in going to Africa? And I thought back to when I was a kid, and you might have seen in the introduction.
Could you talk to the camera?
Yeah, of course, sorry.
Thank you.
You might have seen that I grew up in a movie family. My dad was a makeup artist, a pretty well-known one. And when I was a young boy, my grandmother had a boarding house in a place called Shepperton, which was next to her studios. And my dad and she had a lot of, the main people who stayed in the boarding house were actors and film technicians. And in those days, it was just after the war. They would all sit around, she'd prepare dinner every night, and I, as a little boy, would listen to these stories of these films they'd been doing. And I think the first film of any significance which I started listening about, and I was young, I was 4 or 5 years old, was a film called The African Queen. And The African Queen, some of you may know or may not know it, was Humphrey Bogart and Katharine Hepburn, directed by John Huston. And they went to Africa, the Congo, and they were under canvas for 3 years. Sorry, 3 months, 3 years, it sounded like 3 years. 3 months, and incredible stories I heard that, you know, the whole crew got ill and sick, and they had to shut down the shoot, and then all sorts of things, you know. The only people who didn't get sick was Humphrey Bogart and John Huston, and Katharine Hepburn in her book said, well, that's probably because they didn't drink the water. They just,
pure gin and tonic.
Pure gin and tonic, that's what
old school malaria cures, right?
Exactly. So I heard these stories, you know, and then I was growing up, and my dad did, I think actually when I checked it, I think he did 8 movies in Africa. So as I grew older, I would hear all these stories. And actually, maybe Phoebe, just show the African Queen story. There's 4 photographs maybe worth looking at. Is that the first one?
That's the second one.
The first one was my dad with Bogart and Lauren Bacall. That one, yeah, making him up. And then the next one was the 2 of them, Bogart and Katharine Hepburn. And anyway, he was doing all these movies, and I would, you know, listen to all these stories. And so I thought, well, that's Rhonda Fleming. That's Rhonda Fleming, a film called Odongo. That's my dad on a movie called, I think that's Odongo too. Yeah, those are the pictures. So he did a film called Mr. Moses, Roots of Heaven, with Robert Mitchum. And, you know, I listened to all these stories. And as I grew up, they were always away, and I went to boarding school, and they would send me letters. My dad would send me letters, and there were those, you know, remember those blue aerogram letters? Thin, and he'd always have some story. He was working with the Maasai, I remember, and he said the story, he said they pierce the animal's jugular vein, and they get the blood, and they drink the blood. And I was just fascinated. I mean, who wouldn't be? And I was a kid, and I was sort of, as I told these stories, you know, all these other kids said, oh, your dad does this job, you know. And so that was the motivation. Hearing all these stories, I thought, well, one day I really would like to go to Africa, and I would love to see what he witnessed, you know. It took me a long time. It was last year. It took me a long time. I traveled a great deal, actually, around the world with my job, but I never got to Africa. And so last year I was able to do it, in COVID. So just to give you some background, so I decided to go to Tanzania. The other thing that had happened, my dad gave me a book called The Serengeti Shall Not Die, which is a great book about the Serengeti. Michael Grinsick, I think, and Bernard Grinsick, two Germans. And there was also a film called Serengeti Shall Not Die. And that film was probably the first time they the Tanzanian government had invited them out there to sort of chart out the Serengeti. And they didn't really, this migration, of course, the Great Migration has been going on for years, right? And it goes from just west of the Ngorongoro Basin. It goes.
These are the water buffalo that migrate?
Well, the wildebeest.
Yeah.
Wildebeest, the zebra, and some gazelle and other.
So together these animals migrate?
Yeah, and they were thinking it was around 600,000. It's around 2 million animals, 1.3 million wildebeest, and I think 300,000 odd zebra. And they go, and it's a continual migration. They go in a circle, they go, and it's always so it's basically following the rains and the grasslands, and they go all the way up into the Maasai Mara in Kenya, and they come back down into the Serengeti, northern Serengeti in northern Tanzania. So when I planned the trip, I thought, well, what I really want to do is I want to see the Maasai, which my dad worked with, and I heard all the stories about, many years later, of course. And I also wanted to see this migration, which was, one of the wonders of the world, really. I think it's the biggest animal migration there is. I mean, in fact, I know that. So I thought, well, I'll decide that's what I'm going to do. That's the trip I'll make. Anyway, I'm at home in Studio City. My daughter phones me up and says, Dad, I've just seen this program on a tribe called the Hadzabe. And it's well, you're going to Tanzania, you should try and look them up. And she said they're the last hunter-gatherers in the world, supposedly. And she said, I've just seen this program, and they hunt on foot with bows and arrows, and they have been doing this for 50,000, actually. Still follows that way of life, which is a hunter-gatherer way of life. So I said, okay, I'll look into it. So I looked into it, and I thought, well, that's pretty interesting, so I'll see if I can reroute my trip and maybe go and see them, which I did. And so I did that, and that's led on to see another tribe called the Datoga, and that was the basis of the trip. So it was supposed to be in my original conception, it was going to just be an ordinary safari, see all the animals, like someone said earlier, the big five. But of course, it developed into this much different trip, which was, I'm glad it did. It was a fascinating experience. So that's how that started. That was the genesis of it.
All right.
So.
And then from genesis to realization? Yeah.
Yeah, so from the genesis. So I went, and I actually, in deciding to see the Maasai, I did a little research. There's a Maasai lodge, and what they've done is they've created a village, and it's not really authentic, but they've made it as authentic as possible. And the purpose of it was to actually educate people about the tribe and the traditions and everything else. And I think actually there is Filippo. His name is Filippo. He's a Maasai guide, my guide. He was my guide there. And I stayed there, and I met with him, and he took me around, and we went out into the bush, and he showed me all sorts of things and told me all about their stories and their traditions and their cultures, and it was a very, very interesting, fascinating guy. And he said to me, adjacent to this lodge, there was a school. And it was a school which was started by a lady called Christine Wallner. And Christine Wallner is a philanthropist, German lady, who sold everything to go and work with the Maasai. She had been there, and she started really started a medical clinic, and seeing that they would need some, the medical attention most basic forms they didn't have, and she started it. And it developed, and she started a hospital. Then his daughter came out as a doctor. She was a doctor. And she started this school. And he said to me, we were going around, he said, would you like to go to the school? And I said, sure, I would go to the school. And the day we went to the school was the day that Christine was actually visiting. And all the kids were there, and I was quite uplifting. And this woman's 80 years old, and I think there's a picture, Phoebe, the next one, I think. Oh, oh God, I've jumped ahead, sorry. That was the welcoming party at the Maasai Lodge.
So your guide took you to this welcoming party.
That's the welcoming party at the lodge. So they're all there and they sing, and they had a bit of a joke with me about the blood. They said, it's our tradition, your tradition to, when you're welcome, we give you a nice drink, you know, and they had it. And I knew they kept the blood in gourds. I'd done my research, and I thought, oh, God, here we go. It was a fruit juice.
So you were denied the tradition of your father, but you were relieved that you didn't have to deal with it.
Well, I knew about it. See, I knew about it, and I think people know about it. Anyway, and that's sorry, I jumped ahead there. That's where I stayed. That was the traditional house, and that's the house on the Maasai Lodge, and that's the interior. The next picture is the interior of the house. And although it's not, you know, it's got modern conveniences, it's still done in the traditional way, made in the traditional way. And it was anyway, going forward, now we can go forward. So I went to see this school, and this woman, Christina, was coming to the school. And, God, that's their dance too. That's traditional dance they did.
The hopping thing?
The hopping, the jumping dance, yes, that's it. I thought that was a really nice photograph, actually, just before they started the dance.
Did you hop as well?
I did not. But what I did do, they said, would I like to spear throw? Because that's what we do. That's how we get lions. And so I said, okay. And I did. I made a real fool of myself because it's actually quite difficult. And it was their tradition, as you know.
I thought spearing a lion would be easy, but you're saying that's not the case.
God, no. I mean, really.
What a world we live in, huh?
Yeah, I mean, well, they don't do it anymore, thank God. But they did do it. Certainly when my dad was there, they were doing it. And that was the initiation. You know, that was how you became a man. You know, you killed a lion. They don't do it anymore. But interesting enough, I was speaking this morning, actually, to this Filippo who just he'd phoned me because I was trying to get some information for this chat tonight. And I asked him straight out, I said, so you don't do any of the spear throwing at all for the lions? He said, no, we don't do any more killing. He said, my dad killed 7, but I don't agree with it. We don't agree with it.
So his father had killed 7 lions.
7 lions.
And then he was
that was the maximum you could kill.
Because of the colonial government policies?
No,
or is that internal to the Maasai culture?
7.
So local cultural law is 7's the limit.
You could kill 7.
Yeah.
He said, now if the lion comes and takes one of our cows, then maybe we deal with it. But they get paid. You know, if one of their cows gets killed by a lion, they get paid now, compensated. So that's how they sort of stop that. But I said at the same time this morning, I said, so just tell me about the drinking the blood. Do you still do that? Oh, yeah, absolutely. When a boy is circumcised, has to have the blood. No, he said, that's what he told me this morning. Yeah, so they still do that, yeah. So anyway, going forward. So I went to this school, and Christina Wallner, this woman, that's him. I'm sorry, I'm jumping right ahead. This is Filippo. I think that was, I can't remember which plant that was, but he showed me all these plants which they used to heal themselves. It was, you know, middle of nowhere.
Did you ever get injured to test out the local medicine, or how much of it is placebo effect, or we don't know, or?
No, that stuff works apparently. Yeah. No, I didn't try it. No, not on this occasion. Anyway, Phoebe, what's the next photograph coming up? Yeah, so that picture there, this is Christina Wallner when she came to the school. This lady is 80 years old. All the kids carried her. They were so excited. I've never seen so much excitement. And one of the big questions was for me is that in a society like that do they actually hold on to the traditions, you know, and this woman has made sure that even when they go to school, they get educated all their traditions, their dance traditions, all those traditions are maintained.
Could you delve into that a little bit? Because there's that kind of missionary idea that you'll learn English and then
Yeah.
you'll be forcibly separated from your culture.
I've-
But you were
I've-
saying this is like a good
I
kind
was
of
having that conversation.
synthesis
I
of
was
it.
having exactly that conversation this morning with Philippa, that about religion, and I don't get into any religious thing with it, but he says, we're coming into a compromise. They must learn our culture, and we'll understand religion, religious cultures.
So-
But it's a big, tricky area because, what was fascinating to me that he was so proud of his culture. He didn't want to lose it, and he wasn't going to lose it. And the reason I've been talking with him over these last year is that he wants to write a book because all their traditions, culture, everything is oral. There's nothing written down, and he wants to write it down because he does feel there's an erosion going on of all their traditions. So I've been sort of talking to him about how he should go about that, but he has to get permission from the chief, and of course there's how many? I think there's something like 800,000 living in Tanzania, Maasai, and then there's more living in Kenya. So it's a big population. So when you ask me about vanishing tribes, this tribe is not a vanishing tribe. This is an expanding tribe. There have been a lot of political issues going on in the north. I don't know if you read about them, Serengeti. And they've been removed from some of their lands. But their traditions and the culture is threatened. And I asked him very straight out this morning. I said, so tell me, why do you think that? And he said, globalization, as he's talking to me on his cell phone, which I've always found rather amusing. But, they are being eroded. And the book he feels they will be able to write down and memorialize, if you like, all the traditions. So that was my experience. So Christina, extraordinary lady, has the school and the hospital, and she is doing great work, and she is part of this. It's called Africa Amina Life, this lodge, and all the proceeds, not all of them, but a lot of the proceeds go back into the school, education, medical facilities for the tribe. So, but that's a very small percentage of the people. Mm-hmm. So that was, that was the first part of the journey.
All right, and then?
And then...
Dot. Yeah.
Dot. And then, that's Christina there, and they were so excited. I've never seen that she was like God. She was like a god. They just adored her.
Just in terms of like reverence or gratitude?
They just knew that she'd done a lot of good. She started the educational process for them,
Do you see kind of an analog of her in contemporary American society, or is it just, it's so extraordinary and out there that it's hard to pin?
I think that, I think she'd gone there. I know she went there, and then she was a doctor, and she saw that there was a lot of need, a big need for, a lot of kids died in childbirth. Just basic medical things which we take for granted in the United States. She saw a need for, and that's how it started.
So kind of the cloth of Dr. Paul Farmer's work in Haiti,
yeah,
that kind of thing.
But yeah, exactly that. But she also saw need for education, but she's very much respected the traditions of the people, which is a good thing, because that's the balance, I think, the difficult balance, which we've talked about before anyway. So yes, so that was that. So then that gentleman there, I left the lodge, and then I started my proper safari. But I'm not going to actually go into the safari. I'll go to that to the end because I'm going to jump into the other tribe which I went to. That gentleman's name was Baraka Chacha. He was my guide, and you had a guest on. I saw one of your previous guests here. I think you mentioned his name.
Alan Feldstein.
Alan Feldstein. And I remember him saying in that talk that he did that the most important thing you have when you go on these trips is, especially this sort of trip, is the guide. If you haven't got a good guide on a safari, it's useless, right? And this guy was amazing. I just lucked out. And he went around all the parks with me, and then he went with me to meet the Hadzabe, which is a tribe which I'm now going to talk about, which was very interesting. So I decided to go and see this tribe called the Hadzabe. They are the last hunter-gatherers, I think, in the world. I mean, there may be one or two others, and people here probably can correct me on that. But they basically, they hunt with bows and arrows still. They gather berries. The women dig tubers up, and they don't store any food. They just hunt and gather what they want when they want to eat it. They are totally nomadic, so they build their villages, and when they have taken all the everything they need from the area they're in, they move, and that can be an 11-day walk, or it can be, and then they rebuild. They don't take anything with them. They rebuild the huts, and that's how they live. So they're really quite unique. So that picture there. So hold on that picture, Phoebe. But so what happened? I stayed in a rather nice hotel, but it was a long way from where they are. And they're on a place called Lake Ayasi, Eyaasi, and that's quite a long way from anywhere they were. And so I stayed in this hotel, and I had to get a special guide because they speak a language called Tanzanian, and that's how you know. I needed to get a special interpreter for that. It's a click language, and so.
Did you learn any phrases?
I can't tell you one. It's not even written. It's not written.
Just one click. Yep.
I can't even say it. I can't tell you any, not a word of it. But some of them do speak Swahili. But the children and the elders don't. And actually, probably the tribe's around 1,000, 1,200 people. There's probably only 400 now who are true, because some of them now moved into, they've moved into some of the other tribal occupations around, but they don't, it's a little bit of intermingling.
So it's a culture that will probably be extinct, barring...
I suspect it will be. I mean, it's been under threat for a long time, but they've held on very, very strongly to their... Anyway, so I'm in this hotel, and so I met the other guy, the gentleman called Joseph, and he said, well, we have to leave at 4 o'clock tomorrow morning to go and see this tribe, because it's a long drive, and so I said, fine. So we get up, and we're driving, it's pitch black, and we're driving along, and we're talking, and the road is pretty rough, and it gets rougher and rougher and rougher, and then suddenly we're off the road and driving, and we're going, and we're coming into a clearing, and he gets out the car, and there's one guy there, and I couldn't quite, I saw something was going on anyway. Where they were supposed to be, they moved. So we'd driven to somewhere where they weren't.
But there was still one person there to meet you.
There was somebody there.
I've always found that kind of navigation and rendezvous. How do you know?
I don't know. I don't know.
Because not everyone had their Google Maps, right? Where you're like,
I don't know.
Meet me at the willow brush of...
I don't know. But there was someone there, which was weird. Anyway, we go and we get back in the car, and we're driving, and he says he thinks he knows where it is. And there were these rocks, I remember, and I'm just looking out, and it's the dawn's coming up, and I'm looking, and I see a head watching. And I think they've been watching us the whole time, they're for clear. Anyway, we come to this clearing, and there they are. And that picture there is the first picture I sort of took of them, and that was the dawn, and it was all the kids, right, in the camp, and they were sitting around the campfires early in the morning, and they're just sitting there, and there's one elder. And just to jump back a bit, my daughter had said Sophie, my daughter, said, look, when you go, Dad, they hunt baboons, and they hunt on foot. And I've seen some film of them. They run really fast. And I said, well, I just hope they don't ask me, because I'm 73 years old, and I'm not going to be hunting. Oh, don't worry, they wouldn't ask you. You're an old guy, So I get to the camp, and all the all the young adults are out on a hunt, a 3-day hunt. They're out hunting larger game. And all the kids are there, and there's a lot of chatting going on. And I said, could I take that photograph? And they were very gracious in that. And then the interpreter said to me, would you like to go on a hunt with the kids?
You fulfilled the prophecy, yeah?
And I said, on a hunt with the kids? Yes, because they're going to go and get breakfast. I said, okay, I'll go with. And so we set off, and now, Phoebe, the next photograph, I think, I've got to remember this. Yes, so this is their huts, right? These are the huts. That was the camp. There, that's the camp. That's the hut, close-up of the hut that they build. And they build them, the women build the huts, actually. The women build those. And so I decided, yes, I'll go with the kids. I thought, what can go wrong? So I go, it's just hilarious, really, when I think back about it. Anyway, I think the next photograph that's getting ready to leave for the hunt. That's the camp, and that's us leaving for the hunt. So I was photographing this. And as you can see in this picture, it's the bush, it's scrubland and everything else. And that's the kid, that's where we're getting deeper into the hunt, right? And we're walking, and that's when they're resting in the hunt. We're walking, and then suddenly, they got bows and arrows, these kids. They're probably 9, 10. They start running and disappearing, and I'm sort of not trying to keep up. And I had read also, just to put this into the equation so you'll get it, I had read that the one thing that they don't kill is elephants. One, because the poisoned arrows that they make, I don't think kill some of they're frightened of elephants. And the other thing, which they kill on sight, shoot on sight, is snakes. Because I know with that tribe, that's a baobab tree, a certain amount of deaths occur with the tribe every year with snake bites, black mamba and stuff. And I'm walking, and they've disappeared. I'm on my own, walking. And I just crossed my mind, I wonder if there are any snakes around here. Because this is not like Griffith Park, where there's a big sign up and says, rattlesnake is caution, beware.
The sign does keep you safe. Yeah.
It does. The sign keeps you safe.
No, that sign's there.
And so, and I thought, I've got to shelve that, put that back in my mind, because I was suddenly on my own. They run off. I couldn't see them, I couldn't hear them, they're gone.
And there's no mamba crossing sign?
Nothing.
Right.
So I'm there and, wondering I'm in the middle of nowhere and maybe they've just deserted me, and suddenly one pops up behind me and they sort of circle. You don't hear them, it's silent. It's amazing. Anyway, we carried on with the hunt, and that's a baobab tree. And the baobab tree actually is very interesting because, just to go on a little bit about that, is that that's what he killed on the hunt. That was breakfast, this bird, beautiful bird. And I said, show me that was the kid killed that. And the next picture is him with berries, eating, that's it, picking the berries. But the baobab tree, there's a bird called the honey guide. I don't know if you heard about this bird. And the bird, they sort of call the bird with sounds, and the bird takes them to where the honey is, and it's in these trees, because they have an axe and they can break into the honey. And what they go?
Oh, so a human communicates with a bird, and the bird guides the human to a tree.
Yes, it's the honey guide. Yes, there's apparently this mutual bird,
like a symbiotic relationship.
Yes, exactly. And they go and they cut into the tree, and they first of all start a fire because they have to smoke them. They're African killer bees, so they have to smoke the bees out. And they get the honey, and apparently they always leave a little bit of honey, and the bird knows that. So the bird, wax honeycomb. But honey is their most prized food. That and the baobab fruit, which they grind down into a sort of porridge, and berries, and meat when they can get it.
So how is that small bird divided with the children?
Well, I didn't see that happen.
Okay.
I didn't see that happen, but apparently I know that's happened. The honey guide bird is the way that they.
And then do you find out how they make the poison for their arrows?
Yes, Yes, there's a, I don't know what the Latin name for it is. I think it's called desert rose. And they pick it and they boil it down and they make the poison. And the poison is lethal. It doesn't kill an elephant, but it kills an animal like that. And I've seen them question on that. So how do you eat meat which has been poisoned? It's only around the area where the arrow hits the animal.
Huh. Is it a neurotoxin or
I don't know what it is. Yeah.
desert rose? Huh?
Yeah.
Okay.
I haven't researched that enough.
Well, thank you.
But they do have the poison arrows, and it's you know, and that's how they hunt all the time with that. Anyway, so basically that was my time with the tribe, and the tribe actually do trade. They trade the honey for arrows with another tribe called the Datoga. That's the women in the camp just there, that picture there, that's the ladies and the ladies which I photographed. And the ladies all are separate and the men are here. And after I'd taken the photographs, by the other thing I was going to tell you is that the kids were all smoking, 6, 7 years old.
Tobacco?
Weed.
Marijuana?
Marijuana, yeah. Can you imagine going on a hunt with a lot of stone kids?
Stone kids with poisoned arrows.
With poisoned arrows.
I got you a bird, man.
My God.
All right.
Anyway.
Well, things are the same everywhere, right?
Yeah. Anyway, so that was my my encounter with the Hadza, and so then the guy said, well, we should go and see other tribe called the Datoga tribe, who actually they trade with, and they're metal workers. And so we left and this tribe, and I went then to the Datoga tribe, who you'll see. That's a Datoga lady with her child, which I thought was a very sweet lady she was, who I photographed. And they live sort of side by side. That's the Datoga tribe. They're a little that they don't. They're pastoralists. They don't move. They don't travel. That's their home. They stay in a sort of boma in a compound. And the next picture is let me see. I think it's the metalworking. So it was quite interesting to see how they fashioned these spearheads, and I've got pictures of those. Phoebe, the next one? Yeah. Well, I was invited then, that's the inside of her house, their house, that was her house. She invited me inside, so that was the inside of the house, and she invited me into her kitchen, I think, which was the next photograph, that's her kitchen. She was cooking away there, and I said, I'd had lunch. Anyway, and the next picture is the metal work. That's how the metal works. So one guy does the bellows, gets the charcoal hot, and the other guy melts the metal and makes the spearheads, which I'll show you there. The spearheads are there, or should be there in a minute. Yeah, that's them working the metal. Yeah, so that's what they create. So they're pretty. Weapons. You don't want to get hit with one of those. That's so they trade those with the Hadzabe.
Yeah, it's interesting. You have two cultures that are from two different epochs of what are thought of as human development, right? You have hunter-gatherers that then became the Bronze Age. Did you see the profound cultural differences
No,
beyond
but
like the herd
these hunter-gatherers, the Hadzabe they've never changed. They've remained the same. I mean, in fact, I think that they say 50,000 years. And they've resisted every form of colonialism. When Tanzania became independent in '62, they tried to, bring them into the, pastoralists and make them change them. Didn't happen. They always went back to being hunter-gatherers. But the biggest problem is, and when we talk about vanishing tribes, is that their original land mass, the land which they actually occupied, was 2,500 square kilometers, I think, and now it's down to 500. So they're being, as are all the tribes. So when we talk about vanishing tribes, yes, they're under a threat for sure, and their way of life is certainly under threat.
Was their identity connected to any nation, or was it just
They
tribe
have no,
only?
there is no hierarchy. There's no chief. There's no witch doctor. They have no, they, very little murder. Probably the only murders happen over wives, you know, unfaithful husbands. That's, you know, it's a very, very, and it's a community. They all share their food. So when somebody comes in with a, you know, antelope he's killed or a baboon, they share it. It's extraordinary. And they all look after each other's kids. So, you know, some people are better at hunting and some people are better at gathering, and, you know, it's a very interesting, and they move between camps. So
Yeah, how do decisions get made without any kind of hierarchy?
I think it's just, you know, if you know that camp over there has better hunters, then you might move over there if you're not such a good hunter, and they sort of accept that movement. It's very interesting.
Like a natural equilibrium of talent and resources?
Yeah, it's natural of resources, and there is no hierarchy at all. Doesn't exist. I couldn't figure that one out. I mean, there has to be a chief. There has to be somebody who makes the decisions. No, it's a communal decision. They decide when they're going to move.
Was there even like a conch passing kind of ceremony to deliberate, or just they
No.
know? It's like
For
working on a
example,
farm.
when
maybe,
they
huh?
get married, this is what I heard. One of the young guys will say, well, I'd like to marry her. So his family goes and meets their family, and the 5 women of each family talk, and then the young man goes into the bush, builds a hut, and they're married. She does a bit of a dance, and that's it.
I can see it. Yeah.
You
All
can
right.
see it. Yeah, but it's just pretty amazing. It's pretty amazing, and for me it was, you know. And someone said to me, "Well, what's this? Why is it so important that they actually? What do you think the importance of, you know, keeping something like that? It's probably our only link to how we originally were. How, you know, as people. I mean, if you accept the premise, which I do, that Africa and the Rift Valley was the cradle of civilization. It all came from there. That's where we came from. So that's the closest we got to how we originally were. I mean, they just exist on a day-to-day basis. It's pretty amazing, you know. And there's probably 400 or 500 you know, left. So in a way, I felt very, you know, it was a good idea. I went. You know, it was amazing. And that's me with my new bride, my new house in
So you learned some
Tanzania.
hut building while you were there, huh?
It's my new house. You can see it's my new house. Yeah. Okay. All right. So then I'll jump up again. So that was my, you know, visit to those tribes, which was fascinating. You know, and not very few people go. You know, because it's not. Why would you go? You know, if you didn't know about it, and not many people know about it.
Well, thank you for telling us.
Yeah. Well, I'm sure some people here know about it, but it is extraordinary how they have no. I couldn't get over. No hierarchy, nothing. Yeah, just, you know, and very peaceful people. Other tribe, the Toga, will come in with their cows and go into their water hole and, you know, muck up their water, and they just accept it, you know. And so now, of course, in between all of this, I was on a regular safari, and I was with this Baraka, who was a superb, wonderful guy. And these are some of the animal photographs I took. So I will talk about this photograph because, go back to the leopard, Phoebe, if we can, yeah. So this was in the northern Serengeti. And the northern Serengeti I went to because I really wanted to see the Great Migration, which is really extraordinary. And one day we were out, and he said there were some leopard cubs, and we'd been waiting, and, you know, not going to see anything. And I said to him, I packed up my cameras, and we were in the jeep going back to the hotel. I said, you know, where are those quintessential photographs you always see of leopards, right? The sun was going down, and he suddenly said, I think I've seen one. And he said, look at through his binoculars. And I said, I can't see anything. He said, look. I said, I can't see anything. Where? He said, I can't see a thing. Baraka, what are you talking about? Look. So I'm looking there. So why he was such a great guy, he put me in a position all the time to take good pictures of these animals. He never would go right at them because they would, you know, he'd approach them sideways or whichever way. Anyway, this leopard was in the tree and it was a low light, and I took him. And anyway, he was in the tree when we approached, and I took this photograph. And then he decided to get up. I think the next photograph, maybe Phoebe, is him getting up yet? Oh no, that's a lion. That's a lion. There's a young lion in the tree, who was also, you know, he was.
So the lion and the leopard in the same tree?
No, he was in a different tree. But he was amazing, that young lion. And anyway, the leopard gets up. I think it's 2 after this one. I think he gets up, and he said, "Let's track him." So I think Phoebe, it's the one after. Yeah, he gets up, yawns like that. I haven't put the whole sequence of photographs I took because he climbed down the tree, and I'm really close to it at that point.
How far? Like 10 feet?
Probably where that propeller is there.
So 10 meters?
Yeah. He gets up, he climbs down the tree, and then we track him, and then we come around to track him around, and there he is behind these rocks, and I photographed him, and I literally then he was as close as that you are now.
Can you describe that moment a bit when you're like, because you're making eye contact with a leopard?
Yeah.
It's
different for all sorts of people. I've found for myself, you know, I was never an animal. I'm an amateur photographer. I'm not an animal photographer. I wish I had been, but I'm not. The adrenaline just pumps when you're that close to, you know, he's looking at me, I'm looking at him, you know. It's extraordinary. And he's beautiful, beautiful creature. Amazing. Don't know if you all agree. Do you think so? He is pretty good, isn't he?
How does one track a leopard?
Well, because he came down the tree and he said, "Let's follow him." So I said, "Okay." And he said, "You stand up and be with your camera. Stand up because we'll get." And he disappeared, and he obviously somehow knew where he was going. And we came around this.
This is your guide, not the leopard.
No, the guide.
Yeah.
And we came around, and there he was. And he drove up to him really slowly, side to side, not straight on, sideways. And I was able to take these incredible photographs of him. He was just the most magnificent, beautiful creature. And I was told not to say anything at the camp because the other guys would get very jealous, which there's a great competition who gets the best shots every day. Anyway, so that was the leopard. So the next thing was the migration, which is amazing. So I was at the tail end of the migration because, sorry, elephants.
Oh, just some elephants. Yeah.
Yeah, just some elephants in Tarangire Park. This is the migration, and the migration is something to see because they come, there's masses of wildebeest, masses of zebra, and they come to cross the river. What you're seeing there is what I photographed when they started the crossing. They don't actually always cross. It's very fascinating to watch. They come, they look, and you'll see in a moment, the river is full of crocodiles, and big motherfuckers, huge, 17 foot. And they're there. There's a crocodile going for a zebra. And so they are aware of that, but they've got to get across that river. And they sometimes come and they go right back up again, and they don't always just go. You imagine they just go. But once they start going, they all follow. They follow. And I didn't bring the photographs. I didn't do them, but we did have an extraordinary experience. And there they go. They're all crossing there. It's amazing to watch, and you can see all the crocs. See all the crocs? You can see them or not?
Yep.
They just wait. They really wait to get the younger ones, because there are younger ones. And what they do is that they don't actually, shoot. They grab them and then they take them into deep water and they drown them. That's what they do. And we saw them take a quite large wildebeest, this very big croc. And the wildebeest just was kicking and fighting, and this went on for, we tracked it for an hour and a half. And my guide, Baraka, said, you watch, there's some hippos down there, and if that croc still hasn't got that wildebeest underwater by the time it gets to those hippos will attack. And by God, they did. As soon as he got into range, they attacked the croc let go of the wildebeest. Wildebeest was left, came out the bank next to us, huge marks in his rump, you know.
Why is this matter of interest to hippos?
Because the crocs attack their babiys when they're baby
Oh,
hippos.
okay.
And the hippos hate crocs, and they attack them. And they do attack them. It's something was amazing, you know. Anyway, that's the wildebeest after he's made a successful crossing. That's one that's got across and is free. I think that's a lion in the Ngorongoro. And the lion, that photograph, we used to have to, you know, these photographs didn't just happen. You know, we waited for a long, long time to get photographs like that. That was probably an hour we waited.
What is that stillness like, where you're waiting for this moment?
I love it. I love it.
Yeah.
I love it. I just love just waiting.
What do you think about, or if anything, like, are you just
watch them? Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. I find it very relaxing. But you know, I'm an only kid, so I had to amuse when I was a kid. I used to go fishing, so you know, I could sit by a river for a day. Nothing could happen. Anyway, he was a beautiful creature, and he eventually came and sat right down next to us, again, like where you are. And I was able to take those photographs, which was amazing. And then I think we have the last photograph, which was a sunset over the Serengeti, which was northern Serengeti, which is beautiful.
Oh.
And that's it.
a remarkable journey? Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you very much.
What's it like communing with like, why weren't you afraid of the lion, and like, how did you know, and you know, things like that?
You know, it's funny. I guess you trust who you're with, knows what he's doing, but he's, you know, never. I've seen films on YouTube where not a leopard, but a cheetah got into a jeep with somebody. It was like bizarre. You know, they're all panicking, and you know, I've seen those films which have happened, but they don't take much notice of you, really. They're pretty used to people. They're not, you know, they're aware of you. And if you got out of the jeep, I'm sure you would last 3 seconds. But I find it fascinating to watch them, you know. And they're in a wonderful, wonderful setting. The Ngorongoro crater is amazing, you know. It's just, and I was very lucky because COVID was being terrible for all of us, but nobody was traveling. So I went at the end of last year, and there were not, for example, the lodge close to where I went to see the Hadzabe, I was the only guest, and there were other places where there were 3 or 4 guests. And apparently they'd changed the animals' behavior too. They started coming down into the towns and things. It was very interesting. Where in one place I was staying, they actually had a leopard come through the grounds. So things change, you know, with COVID. But, you know, I mean, it had seriously affected the tourist trade, you know, because people weren't going. But I think it's getting back now.
How do you think the vehicle of photography affected this particular adventure, as opposed to just going there or doing some volunteer science work? Like, why photography?
For me?
Yeah.
I've always loved photography. I just never had the opportunity to really pursue it. My life was too busy, you know, doing stuff, and I took a lot of photographs, you know, usual photographs of kids and stuff, but I'd never really concentrated on taking photographs of animals and things, and I do like doing it. I get great pleasure out of it, you know. Because they're very unpredictable. You don't know. Some of those. One day I went out and you don't get a photograph, you know, because they're too far away or they don't come, and you know.
Were you disappointed, or it's just like it's all part of this
Oh,
process?
it's part of the
and-
process, for me. Oh, yeah. I mean, you know where I'm going in February. I'm perfectly prepared not to get one photograph at all.
Well, wonderful. Was there anything you'd like to add? And then we can open
No,
up
I
the
mean,
audience?
that was it. And thank you for letting me share that trip, because it was a wonderful trip. And anybody like to ask me anything about it?
Well, yeah, thank you very much
I'm-
for elucidating us, and then the interwebs, as the kids will say, right?
Yeah.
So thank you again.
Pleasure,
All right.
pleasure.
All right. This rambunctious audience, who has a question? Yes, in the back. Is there a carrier of micro? Actually, you're a member now. Get your own microphone. Come on. And then you'll be the porter of mics.
One day I already got a job.
All right. I think I'm going to have to turn it on.
So just curious, what was your experience as far as the welcome from the locals? I know a lot of the tribes in Africa, especially ones that don't get the Western visitors, it can be a interesting experience.
Excellent question. Excellent question. Because the Hadzabe tribe were not, and I think it's because, in fact, well, I know this. For example, 100 years ago, they hadn't had any contact with anybody. They, in fact, when white colonialists or anybody went, explorers, they hid. So there was a certain suspicion, I think. Once they knew that I was not, I wasn't exploitative, if we were going to be exploitative in any way, I think they relaxed a little bit. Andrew knows this. When I take the photographs like that, I try and make them as dignified as possible. I don't want to do anything which would in any way offend them. You know various customs, especially in Africa. If you photograph people, they have depends who you know that then who you photograph them. Some customs, they think you're interfering with their ghosts and all sorts of things. So you have to be very careful. The Toga, if you looked at the guy who was doing metal work, he was very suspicious of me. He was not smiling and anything else. The women were very much more friendly, but the guys weren't so friendly. But the Maasai, on the other hand, were very friendly, very welcoming. But then the particular place I went, they were, it was in a way, I think pleased to be showing off their culture. They're gone. It's okay.
No, you're back.
Yeah. But yeah, that's a good question because it varied. It varied a lot.
Is there another question? Yes. In the back.
Okay. Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
In your close encounter with the leopard, so close, who blinked first?
Who blinked first? He didn't blink. He just stared at me. And I was always a little worried because I have cats. His ears were flat. His ears were flat. And when their ears are flat, that can be not a good sign. But he was a beautiful creature, just amazing. Yeah.
You were always in the vehicle when you were photographing?
Yeah, I think he wouldn't let me out. Yeah.
Let me share just a little story with you.
Please.
Can you do it in the microphone so they can
Oh, I'm
hear
sorry.
you on posterity?
Thank you. A little story. I went on bird hunting safaris for a number of years, and I don't anymore, but I still go over there and do the same thing with tribes and just stay with tribes. And they're just as interested, especially the ones that don't have much contact. In some ways, they're more interested in us than we are in them because they don't have any TV or anything else, and so they're interested in hearing about who the hell you are,
Yeah.
But the one story, I was out doing a game drive, and we're out looking at lions, and of course you can pull right up next to them in your big green vehicle, and they've got, they have 2 lioness or 3 lioness, and there's a wildebeest foot up, and they've got their head in there, and you can barely see anything other than the back of their heads. So there was these Japanese tourists, and the guy had the long tele lens and everything, and he opens the door, and he gets down low on the ground, so he gets that perfect shot with the big lens. And one of the lionesses looked up and took her about 2 bounds to get about 25 feet or so, and grabbed him by the neck and dragged him off. And they were at Maasai Mara, so there were no guns. They couldn't have any guns in there. And he sat there and ate them. Well,
Did you witness this?
I didn't see it. I was with a guy who saw it, who was a guide, and either saw it or heard it. It's a great story. Whether it's true or not, it doesn't matter. It's a great story to tell to new tourists.
It is true, because there was a film made, an Italian film, many years ago, Montecano, I think it was, which actually showed there was a German tourist who got out to photograph a pride of lions. He got out of the vehicle and he's shooting with the 8mm camera.
Right.
And quick, you could blink, they were wherever, he's gone.
Exactly. And but on the other hand, I'd been there several times, and right up next to them, leopards and all the rest of it, and they just don't give you any never mind. They're just.
You didn't get out of the vehicle.
No, I never got out. My mom didn't have any dumb kids.
Yeah, that was what he said to me. Never get out. I mean, if you get out, then
Yeah. Even on one occasion, I went to the migration up north again in Maasai Mara.
Right.
And I'd gotten out, and I walk with a cane anyway, and I was going to take a little walk. I'd been in airplanes forever, you know, and they wouldn't let me take a walk unless I went with somebody with a gun.
Right.
Yeah.
No, it's interesting. One of the camp I stayed at in the northern Serengeti, actually, they wouldn't let you go back to your tent at night. You could just as easily walk bump into a leopard or a lion.
Nope.
They were there.
You never know.
Yeah.
Other questions? I have another question.
Of course.
Did anyone from the tribes see your photos, or no?
No.
Interesting.
No.
Is that going to happen, or can that even happen?
Well,
or?
I think with the no, I correct myself. The Maasai did see. I showed them some of them, but not the Hadza did not see them. No.
And then what are your thoughts on policies or things people can do to preserve cultures like this, if anything?
It's such a complicated question. So I think that we're in this club now. We're talking about these things, which is good. You know, and one of the things which really bothered me a little bit was that. And it's always money that came into it. I heard this after the event, that a lot of the Hadza lands, originally Hadza lands, were in fact leased by the Tanzanian government to the UAE for hunting, trophy hunting. And apparently it caused such an uproar, went to the UN apparently, and then they sort of gave up. But I think there's always a movement there. There's a company, I've forgotten the name of it, who, try and get hold of land for trophy hunting, and so you're fighting vast amounts of money.
So basically land reclamation.
Yeah, land reclamation.
Almost like people's model of environmental reclamation, like saving the rainforest by just preserving the actual rainforest.
Yeah, but I think, I've thought a lot about it.
It's kind of going. Just keep talking.
Okay.
There we are. All right.
I thought a lot about it. One can't stop progress, but my conversations with the Maasai, he wants to preserve his culture. He's very proud of it, and I respect that. So, myself personally, and I just hope more people do. And from a governmental level, in Tanzania, it's gone again.
Yeah.
I mean.
All right. Well, thank you again. Round of
it.
applause, and we can continue the conversation back with cookies and coffee. And thank you again for blessing our stage, sir.
Thank you, Andrew, for inviting me.
Please like, subscribe, share, and check out other videos from the club's history. And take care of yourselves out there.